Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So in honor of the release of Spencer, the latest film to explore the life of the late Princess of Wales, Diana herself, I thought it'd be fun to, instead of doing a regular movie review of Spencer on its own, to compare the film Spencer with another film exploring the life of Princess Diana in 2013's Diana. Now this video is part of my kind of versus series. I still haven't come up with a better name for this series of videos, but essentially in these videos I take two films and kind of compare them against one another, give you guys a deep dive analysis on each of the films, the similarities, the differences, what I think each film does better or worse. It's just a fun time exploring certain films that have certain similar characteristics. So today we're adding to the collection and we are going to be exploring these two films that center on the life of the Princess of Wales, Diana. And of course, since we're going to be talking about a princess today, I decided to go ahead and dress like one. I decided to go ahead and wear my finest jewels, my tiara, and also including my engagement ring, which was given to me by my imaginary prince. So yeah, we're just gonna have some fun with this video. I'm going to be delving into my thoughts on both of these films, talking about what I liked and what I disliked, and of course trying to decide which one of them does the most justice to the icon, to the legend that was Diana, Princess of Wales. But before we get into all of that good stuff, as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. And also let me know down in the comments below whether you enjoy these videos and if you have any ideas for any future versus videos, these two films that you would like to see me compare. Share your thoughts down below. But without further ado, let's get into my thoughts on Diana versus Spencer. I had to go ahead and remove the necklace because it was choking me. But for the first category in this competition, as it were, we are going to be delving into the stories, the writing of both of these films. Now here we have two films that center on the same person but at different points in her life. In the case of 2013's Diana, the film centers on her life after she had already left the royal family, after she had divorced Charles and went about trying to make a life for herself devoid and separate from the royal family, at least as much as she could be, considering the institution and the power of the establishment and everything, and also considering how unprecedented it was to have the quote-unquote crown prince, the first in line for the throne, being a divorced man, and trying to navigate how that would work and how the public was to see Diana in light of this. The 2013 film follows Diana in her final years as she tries to go out there, spread the word on these causes that she really cares about, but also try to create a whole new personal life for herself, trying to find love again with another person. But all the while she is constantly surrounded by, bombarded by paparazzi. Like, it is non-stop, and that's the first thing that I will say this film does exceedingly well. This feeling of being overwhelmed, of being suffocated by paparazzi, by press, by these paparazzos who are just relentless. I think this film did exceedingly well because I felt that suffocation, I felt that frustration. It was anger inducing, it was so annoying. And also you could see how something like this, being bombarded by press time and time again 24/7, would be all consuming and would have detrimental impacts to Diana's life and her relationships. And we see that play out in the film, but I just wanted to say up top how exceedingly well this film portrays this. The flashing lights that she's constantly surrounded by, even in moments where she just wants a break, she just wants a moment to herself and with her partner, but she's not even afforded that. I think this film conveys the frustration surrounding that very well. And considering the fact that this film does explore Diana's life in her final years, and we ultimately know what what happened to her, the tragedy of her death. And that was very much related to how much she was plagued by the paparazzi. The presence, or the ever presence of the press throughout this film kind of acts as foreshadowing, but not just in a metaphorical sense, but also in a literal sense, because we know that at this time she was one of the biggest stars, most iconic people on the entire planet. Now, another difference when it comes to the story in the 2013 film is that it focuses on Diana trying to move on in a romantic sense after her divorce from Charles. We see her start to pursue a relationship with Dr. Dodi, who is a heart surgeon, I believe, and we see her trying to navigate this relationship in light of the fact that, like I just said, she is constantly bombarded and surrounded by paparazzi, and this is something that she has become accustomed to personally. She was, after all, in the royal family, so she knows what it's like to have the press following her around all the time, but we see how that can kind of impact her relationship when her partner isn't used to this kind of attention. In the case of Dodi, he's not interested in the limelight. He's not interested in being photographed every single time he sneezes. He just isn't interested in this invasion of privacy that comes with dating Diana, and so they're trying to figure things out, but ultimately you can tell that this relationship is doomed because of this invasion of privacy that plagues Diana. Now, I actually appreciated the exploration of Diana's romantic relationships outside of Prince Charles and the, issues that she had with Prince Charles, because I do feel like it's become so much a part of the narrative around this person, and it's become so integral to how people think of Diana and how people look to her story. But I think it's important to acknowledge that, she was a separate person from Charles. She wasn't conjoined at the hip with him, and once they divorced, she tried to create a new life of her own that was devoid of the royal family, at least as much as it could be, considering that her sons were princes. Like I said, I appreciated the fact that this film tries to explore what that romantic relationship would have looked like and the troubles that she faced trying to pursue one because of how profile she was at the time. Having said that, though, I wouldn't say that the execution in this film is done very well. I think Diana here becomes quite whiny, quite whingy, quite needy in this film, and considering that there's no one who can fully attest to her behavior in those moments, those private moments that she shared with Dodi, I feel like it's an interesting interpretation of this person. I personally wasn't a fan of this interpretation. It could be accurate, but like the filmmakers don't know. So it's an interesting route to take in order to portray the icon, the legend that is Diana. I feel like she just became so whingy, and like at times I completely understood, especially when it comes to the frustration that she has towards the press. Absolutely, the press sucked. The press sucked. They treated her so poorly, okay? But when it comes to those private moments between Dodi, like, you didn't have to do her dirty like that. Here, Diana is just so unbearably whingy, whiny. She's sometimes entitled, and Dodi doesn't really have any chemistry with Diana either in this film. I don't feel like the actors had great romantic chemistry to begin with, but especially on Dodi's side, the actor who portrays him just wasn't selling me, leading man romance type. Like, he was very much in love with his craft, very much in love with his work as a heart surgeon. That's the emotion and the love that I saw being expressed there, but none of that was directed towards Diana. Another feature that Diana has that is absent from Spencer is the incorporation of Diana's charitable efforts. She was known as the people's princess for a reason, not just because of this aesthetic marketing that the royal family tried to sell, although that's definitely part of it, don't get it twisted, okay, but also because of the genuine love, the genuine respect and adoration for children and for people who were in disadvantaged backgrounds that she really wanted to help. And you could see the humanity, the love, the care that she had for the charitable efforts that she pursued. And here we see featured Diana's famous campaign against landmines that were prominent throughout Angola and various countries in the world that still have landmines today. And as this film explained, Diana was very passionate about the dismantling dismantling and the kind of deactivation of these landmines, which was a very delicate, costly, difficult process, because a lot of these landmines are relics from wars and they cause horrific injury to unsuspecting victims, especially children who are running around in fields not knowing any better, and then they're hit with landmines that take away their limbs and it affects them for the rest of their lives. And honestly, it's just so heartbreaking to see the impact of these landmines, and this film does a good job of showing how much she cared about this cause. And then you have some iconic scenes where she's walking across the landmine, and this was something that she actually did in front of the press back in the day to demonstrate the progress that they were making in dismantling and removing the landmines in a field in Angola. So the fact that she had risked her own life, because don't get it twisted, one wrong step and you lose a limb, like I said, or you could die. These landmines are dangerous, and the fact that she herself, you know, walked across that field demonstrating the progress that they had made was a really important and iconic moment for her. And the exploration of Diana's charitable and philanthropic efforts is something that Spencer doesn't really delve into, because it focuses on a different part of Diana's life, and it's also more a look at a short period of time and a lot of depth, as opposed to trying to stretch out the amount of time that it explores, as is the case in Diana, the 2013 film, trying to explore more elements of this person before she ended up dying in this tragic event. I will say, however, that when it comes to 2013's Diana, it's a shame that it focuses so much on being this melodramatic, doomed love story between her and Dodie, when in reality I would have preferred to see her charitable efforts, you know, her philanthropic ways, you know, the things that people loved about her being at the forefront of the discussion and of the story, and perhaps exploring the romance behind the scenes and the difficulties that she had developing those relationships in light of her high profile status secondarily. Okay, so then we get on to 2021's Spencer. Now here we have a change of name. We'll talk about the name in a second, okay? But here we have Diana once again, and we're exploring her life at a different stage here, because this is just before she split from Charles, but she already knows about the affair that he's having with Camilla. There's already a great tension in their relationship and in their marriage, and this is something that has clearly permeated across the entire family. There's definitely a tension and a coldness there. We'll talk about coldness in a second, but here we have Kristen Stewart portraying Diana in this very short period of time during the Christmas holidays, the Christmas festivities that take place in this castle. Can't remember the name of the castle specifically. I think it's Sandringham that they're at. So the whole royal family has come to Sandringham to celebrate the Christmas holidays, and along comes Diana. She's running late. She actually ends up coming after the Queen, which is a massive faux pas, because you're not supposed to be letting the Queen wait for you, like absolutely not. But she comes in after the Queen. She got lost along the way. That's kind of the opening sequence that we have, and she ends up arriving at the estate, meeting a bunch of, you know, footmen and a bunch of servants who are just shaking their head and tutting because they already know that was a massive faux pas. And then pretty much as soon as she heads into the building, she comes across the first affront. She is immediately affronted by something that is very emotionally charged for her, and that is some scales. Now these scales represent the dichotomy between the free-thinking and individual Diana and the old stuffy kind of collectivist institution that is the royal family, because the scales in the eyes of the royal family are just a fun tradition. Like, it's just a fun time, as everyone keeps saying. It's a silly thing not to be taken seriously, but in the case of Diana, it means everything. It means a lot more to her because she is bulimic. She has a very difficult relationship with food and her weight and her body image, as we see throughout this film very viscerally. And so being affronted by these scales that are just supposed to be a bit of fun means far more to her personally. So she's made to sit on those scales as part of this tradition. Again, the royal family being very much embedded in tradition. This tradition that basically the way you, before you start start the Christmas festivities, and then after, when you're done with all the festivities, they'll weigh you again to check that you've gained a few pounds, to make sure that you've had a good time, because if you've gained weight, it means you've been eating, it means you've been having a fun time. But in the case of Diana, again, suffering from an eating disorder, it's not as fun in her eyes. And so, like I said, in contrast to 2013's Diana, that kind of explores a series of events that led to her tragic death over the course of a few years, here we have a focus, a laser focus on just a few set of days, on this fictitious celebration of Christmas that the royal family would have had, and Diana's experience, her emotions, her reactions to being in this family, knowing that her marriage is on the brink. Now, as I just said, the series of events that are explored in Spencer are largely imagined. They're fictitious, they're metaphorical more than literal. In the case of Diana, it tries to portray the series of events leading up to her death in a more kind of biographical way, although I'm sure it takes a ton of liberties, especially considering, like I said, no one can vouch for what really happened between her and Dodie and her romantic partners during that time. So I'm sure it's like biographical, wink wink, with like a dramatic license, wink wink. But in the case of Spencer, it doesn't try to be literal in any stretch of the imagination, but rather it provides us with this kind of metaphorical representation of an amalgamation of what Diana would have felt and perhaps would have experienced, and also how the royal family would have responded to her at this time. But we don't know for sure, you know, if that is the case, and in fact it likely isn't exactly as it is portrayed in the film. Because of these metaphorical representations, we do see a lot of visual cues that are very interesting here. They're very emotionally charged, but the visual cues aren't just in what you do see, like the visual representations of Anne Boleyn, of these pheasant birds on the ground, you know, all of that stuff. It's not in just what you see, but rather what you don't see. In the case of Spencer, one of the ever-present forces at play here is the paparazzi and the press. Now that sounds familiar because of course that's something that was explored in Diana as well. But in the case of Diana, as I said, they are an ever-present presence in the film. Like, she is constantly affronted by flashing lights left, right and center. In the case of Spencer, they are absent. Okay, they are obscurely absent, even though people keep warning her about them. Why? Because she is in a fortress. She spends the majority of this film's runtime in this literal fortress, guarded by literal army men, okay, literal commanders of different armies, of like the Black Watch and all of this, who know what they're doing when it comes to preventing the press from seeing what the royal family does not want them to see. And so here we see Diana at a stage of her life where she's still under the protection, I guess, the protection of the royal family, whereas we contrast this to afterwards when she, you know, left the family, she divorced from Charles, she's trying to, you know, start a new life for herself, and she's just constantly surrounded by press, and perhaps doesn't have the same, I mean, surely doesn't have the same level of protection that she once did, even though back then still she was still very much photographed, very much at the forefront of press's attention, as we see her being constantly reminded of in this film. Now, I personally felt like it was a little bit more effective to see the presence of the paparazzi in Diana's life in the film Diana. I did feel like it was much more emotionally impactful to see her constantly be surrounded by these flashing lights as she gets into the car. There was this constant feeling of suffocation. Every single time she wanted to just take a breath, she was met with a camera on her face. I feel like that was very effective. Whereas in the case of Spencer, the cameras, like I said, they're invisible. And I feel like whilst that could be seen as quite effective, especially when you have the context of Diana herself, which we'll talk about in a second, but I do think personally that it's tough to line up the reaction of the character in the film when you don't see the outside forces that's creating this reaction. And that's kind of a problem that I have with the film overall, is that if you remove all of the outside context and history surrounding Diana, the real life person, and a lot of older generations, and not even like that much older, but like people who grew up in the 90s and the 80s will be very familiar with her life and her story from back then. I was born just a year before she died, so though when I was growing up, she was, you know, part of history, but not really a hot topic at that moment. And so I know a bit about her story, but not as much. And of course, I live in the UK, so of course she was still a presence. But still, I feel like as we move along away from the tragic death, I do feel like there needs to be a bit more effort in these films and these productions to explain a little bit more. And it might sound insulting, but it's just because time moves on, and so this story needs to be told fully and properly. And in the case of Spencer, if you don't have much context on this person, again, like who doesn't, but some people don't, I don't think you would understand the visceral emotional reactions of the character in a way that they make sense in Diana the film, where she's literally just swimming in cameras all the time. And that's also the case with the depiction of the royal family in Spencer as well. The royal family is intentionally portrayed as this incredibly distant and incredibly cold, both metaphorically and literally, presence in Diana's life, something that she has to fight with, despite the fact that of course she has this constant anchor to them in the form of her two sons. But it can be a little bit difficult to understand the, again, visceral emotional reactions that she has in this film if you don't fully understand the nature of the royal family and the suppressive and oppressive force that they acted upon her during her marriage to Charles. If you don't have that, again, wider context, it can be tough to understand, like, well, why is she screaming? Why does she feel so frustrated? Because this film doesn't make an effort to fully explain that. It takes the fact that she's such an iconic, popular figure in history for granted to kind of create a bit of a shortcut in terms of storytelling. And honestly, I would say that that's pretty much the case for both of these films. I wouldn't go into these films not knowing who Diana is, and they're banking on that. I mean, the fact that we have these titles to begin with shows just how iconic she was, just how legendary she was. And the filmmakers rightfully, at least to some extent, assume that the majority of the audiences will recognize who the films are about based off of just one word: Diana in the case of the 2013 film, and Spencer in the case of 2021. But still, as I said, as time goes on and Diana's story becomes deeper and deeper in history, I would suggest filmmakers start to reevaluate how they approach storytelling surrounding her, and perhaps try and take a little bit more time to explain her backstory and really make sure that audiences who didn't grow up with her as such an integral part of pop culture also understand and follow along with the story of the film. So overall, when it comes to comparing these two approaches to the story of Diana, I'm hard pressed to say that there's one that's better than the other. I like the approach that Diana, the 2013 film, took in terms of showing us a series of events that played out leading up to her tragic passing, and also the ever presence of the paparazzi acting as a horrible, cruel, tragic foreshadowing for her ultimate demise. So I think that made sense. The only thing that I didn't love about, well, not the only thing, not the only thing, it's not a great film, not the only thing that I didn't love, but still one of the things that I didn't love about that 2013 film was just how focused and just how obsessed it was with her romantic relationship with Modi, or Dodi, I think his name is, sorry. Like I said, I would have preferred if the roles were reversed and there was more emphasis on her philanthropy and her charity work, the stuff that made her known as the people's princess, and then the romance came second. I didn't want it to be the main plot of the story. I mean, she's not just some, you know, female lead in a romantic drama after all. She's Princess Diana, for God's sake. And in the case of Spencer, like I said, this is more of a companion piece to like a documentary on Diana. If you don't know who Diana was, or you don't really know much about her, this film is gonna make you feel quite lost. Okay, so I spent a long time talking about the stories to this point, but they are a pretty important comparison category for these two films. But next up, let's talk about a shorter category in the names themselves. So first of all, we have the 2013 movie called Diana, and then we have the 2021 movie called Spencer. Now, I'll just say up front, obviously, you know, Spencer couldn't really be called Diana because that name had already been taken. Like, it's already been taken, okay? So I'm sure they would have contemplated calling the film Diana had it been an option and had the 2013 film not already taken that title. But the reason why this is significant to begin with is, of course, because Diana was so iconic. Like, she is just such an iconic figure in history, in women's history, in British history, in royal history. And so the fact that the 2013 film was just able to use that one word, her name, her first name, and it's immediately recognizable as to, you know, who the film is focusing on. It just speaks to the legacy of this woman, and also the fact that we have her first name being there. Like, it's so uniquely hers, it's so unmistakably about her and her alone. It's not about the royal family, it's not about any of the others, and you see that in the absence of the royal family, largely speaking, in the film itself. I mean, the only royals that we really see in Diana are her sons, and that's also a reoccurring theme in Spencer, where her sons play a more prominent role in the film. So here it feels like the title is trying to convey that the film focuses on her as a unique individual, the contributions that she made to society and to history, and trying to separate her legacy from that of Charles and the rest of the British royal family. And I think Spencer tries to do a similar thing. It doesn't call Diana, you know, Windsor. It's not Diana Windsor. It's Spencer, which was her maiden name. And Spencer, the name itself, is a pretty important name because Diana was an aristocratic woman. She did come from royalty herself. So she wasn't just some like peasant. She already had roots in royalty from her ancestry. And in fact, in the film, it is explored that her childhood home was just a stone's throw away from Sandringham to begin with. And again, that's a nod to her aristocratic roots, because not just anyone can have a home next to the Queen's estate, okay? So for those in the know, they'll understand that the Spencer name represents, you know, those aristocratic roots as well. But on a more surface level, of course, it is her maiden name, so there is a tie to her family overall, just in general. This idea that even when she was married to Charles, her tie to her family, her wish to reconnect with her family roots was very important to her, especially when their relationship was on such rocky ground because of his infidelity. And again, we see that play out as a theme in the film, where she just yearns to return to her childhood home, which is a stone's throw away. Her childhood home, which has been boarded up, locked up. It's been, you know, deemed a defunct building, so no one can go in there. There's barbed wire, just all of these kind of keep out signs all over the place, and she feels like she's so close yet so far. But there are these various symbols throughout the film, like the scarecrow that's wearing her father's coat, these little reminders of who she was before she met Charles, before she became involved with the royal family, the childhood that she had, and she's trying to reconnect with that inner girl. And that's why she ends up heading towards the boarded up house. It's all creaky, the wood is like rotting, she really shouldn't be there, but it feels like the place that she needs to be in order to reconnect with her family and with her childhood self at this difficult time. But either way, with both routes, we see a kind of attempt to make the story more personal and more connected to Diana as a person, as opposed to the exploration of the British royal family and her place in it overall. Now, next up, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's talk about Charles. Very briefly, I won't be affording him a lot of screen time in this video, let's make that clear, but we need to address the elephant in the room, okay? As I've been saying, in both cases, these films delve into the relationship that Diana had with Charles and how it was breaking down due to his infidelity. They focus on his infidelity, even though there were rumors that the infidelity may have been taking place from both parties. Perhaps one was a reaction to the other, but I'm not here to speculate on that, okay? I'm just talking about the films. But in both cases, interestingly enough, Charles himself doesn't have much of a presence in the films, likely because of what I just said. You know, both of these films are trying to delve into Diana the person and trying to make these films feel like a personal exploration of her as opposed to the royal family at large. And so they kind of push the royal family, you know, the Queen, the usual suspects, the Queen, the Duke of Edinburgh, all of them are pushed to the periphery in both cases, and they focus on Diana. They give her the spotlight. But her relationship with Charles, whether it's current or in the past, still kind of hang over her throughout the events of both of these films. In the case of Diana, the 2013 film, she very much refers to him as like an ex-husband. She refers to him as like an ex. It doesn't feel like she's talking about Prince Charles. Like it feels like she's just this ordinary every woman in, like I said, yet another female-led romantic drama who happens to be talking about her ex who cheated on her. And like, you know, you could think none the wiser of it if you didn't know the full story. But it's a very interesting approach where it kind of downplays his position. I kind of like it, quite frankly. But yeah, it's an interesting approach that Diana, the film, takes in order to address the relationship that Diana had with Charles and the breakdown of that relationship. It basically barely addresses it at all. Like, really. But then of course we have Spencer, where that is at the core of the film itself, because here we're at the precipice of the point where the relationship breaks down entirely. Here Diana is fully aware of the affair that Charles has had with Camilla, and then we have Charles himself. He only makes an appearance in Spencer with these sharp, very distant, very dismissive phrases and statements that he makes towards Diana. All of them basically amount to, why can't you just sort yourself out? Like, that's literally how he treats her. Like, why can't you just get fixed up, get it together, just be what the royal family needs you to be, follow tradition, do what you're told, come in on time, just get it done, you know? Like, there's this feeling of like, I don't want to deal with you. You're not the person I love. I don't care about you. We have children together. We have an image to put out, to send out to the world. And we have two sides of ourselves, the real side and then the side that's just a performance for the rest of the world. You need to understand that. You need to get it together and just go off, okay? Go off and be better, do better. There's that kind of feeling in all of the interactions that Diana has with Charles. And the main interaction that takes place is in this scene in like a library or something. There's a pool table and he barely even looks at her during that scene. Like, he's like looking off into a window, playing with the, you know, balls on the table. And there's this feeling of like he can't even look her in the eye, and she's trying to plead with him. She's trying to talk to him about the shooting, because their son is expecting to go shoot for the first time, and she's not happy with that. She's not okay with this particular tradition, and just Charles isn't interested in her input in the parenting. He doesn't care, and you get a similar sense of that as well in Diana, the 2013 film, where there isn't an equal amount of power in the parenting towards these children, because they are being brought up to be royalty. They're not ordinary children, and so there's certain procedure, there's certain traditions that they have to follow, regardless of what their mother wants for them, which is just heartbreaking. So yeah, in both cases, of course, Charles is not looked upon favorably, but in the case of Spencer, he is considered like an oppressive force, and he doesn't even do much to show it, like in the film. But like I said, because of the wider context, because of what we know from history, you can use that information to fill in the blanks, and that further charges these scenes between Charles and Diana, where all we can manage to get from them are these stilted sentences where they can barely even look at each other in the eye. Now, we do get that scene at the very end there, which we'll talk about when we discuss motherhood being a theme in both of these films. But in the case of Charles and his specific reaction to that scene, where Diana just takes her boys and gets the fudge out of there. She's like, I've had enough, okay? She takes her boys, she takes the gun away from William's hand. She's like, get rid of that, okay? We are out of here. Charles's reaction during that is just so interesting, because everyone is looking to him to be the father, to be the authoritative figure, and to, you know, take control of his woman and make sure that the kids do what he wants them to do. You don't let her take charge of your parenting. So again, there's this feeling of like the power dynamic is not balanced whatsoever. He is expected to take charge, and it's very traditionalist in that way. Of course, royal family tradition, we see the pattern here, but he's just stumped, and he's just like, yeah, I guess let her take the kids, because, you know, she's literally standing in the middle of the field, guns facing her, pointing towards her during this hunting trip, and she refuses to leave until she has those kids in her hands. And Charles is just there stumped, and you can tell that he hates her for it. You can tell that he resents that act of rebellion that he just showed in front of everyone, including his grandmother, the Queen. He despises her for it, but there's nothing he can do. And I think that's something that, you know, if the film continued on, we would see the repercussions of that, unfortunately, against Diana. But in that moment, it feels like a win because of Charles's reaction, and because of the fact that she finally gets to have the Christmas festival activities with her son that she actually wanted. Okay, so now let's talk about the theme of motherhood that is explored in both of these films. It is a very, very important theme when it comes to exploring the life of Diana, the Princess of Wales, because it was known that she was very, very close to her sons. She often insisted on bringing her sons to all of the, trips that they had and all of the events and occasions that they had to go to as part of their roles in the royal family. She just wanted to be close to her children, and some people suspect that it was because of her own upbringing and because of the distance that was there between her and her mother. Perhaps she didn't want her sons to have the same experience as her growing up with her mother, the way that she was, which was quite distant, and so she wanted to keep her children close to her. And that of course goes against the tradition in the royal family, because you have a lot of these obligations and a lot of travel is involved in that, and so you can't always necessarily bring your children to all of these events. But that's something that she tried to do in order to stay close to them and in order to monitor their upbringing, as opposed to just leaving them in the hands of nannies and other tutors that would just take care of everything, which is what Charles would have experienced himself and expected for his sons. Now, in the case of Diana, the 2013 film, we don't really see much of the two boys, and we see Diana trying to spend time with her sons. That's obviously something that's quite important to her, but one thing that was notable to me is just how separate she was from them. You get the sense that she had no power, like I said, in this child arrangement. Like, it's not just it's not a 50-50 split, okay? You can tell that her sons come to visit her during the holidays or like on some occasions, but they're very few and far between, unfortunately, because of the rigorous kind of prince making process. And so Charles has a lot of control there when it comes to their upbringing, and she feels like she's very much an outsider. It's almost as if, by deciding to split from Charles, he's kind of punished her by splitting her from her sons as well. And in the case of Spencer, we see how important Diana's relationship with her sons really was to her. It's basically the thing that's keeping her sane, and she trusts her sons even to tell her when she's acting, strange or, crazily, because of that intimate relationship that they have together. I mean, it's only in the times when she's playing with her sons, these games, where they're pretending to be these various characters or roller skating around the place, it's only in those moments that she seems happy, that she seems like she has some relief from the oppression of the institution. And again, one motif that we see kind of symbolize the relationship that Diana has with her sons versus with the rest of the royal family was that of heat or coldness. Diana constantly complains throughout the film that the rooms in the estate are freezing cold because they refuse to turn on the heating. And one of the main reasons why she complains of this is because her son himself, Harry, I believe it was complaining that he was freezing cold, and she just hated the fact that her son was suffering when they could just turn on the heating. But because of how they're stuck in their ways, they just refuse to do so. And so, she has to kind of wrap him up in a ton of clothes and put lots of layers on him to keep him warm. But when they're together at the end of the night, just kind of snuggling, that's when they're able to get some warmth. And so it's kind of representative of the warmth of the motherly love that she gives to her sons, and in large contrast to the coldness, the harshness of the rest of the royal family that is depicted as very distant and unloving. I would say, in terms of the depiction of Diana's relationship with her children, Spencer definitely takes the cake. I mean, it's done very beautifully here. They are literally her reprieve. They are literally her only joy when it comes to this whole sequence of events. So of course, I would say that Spencer does a really good job of focusing in on motherhood and what it meant to Diana. Okay, so finally, in this battle royale comparison, we are going to be exploring the performances of both of the actresses. So on one side, we have Naomi Watts portraying Diana in the 2013 film Diana, and then on the other side, we have Kristen Stewart portraying Princess Diana as well. And in the case of Naomi Watts, her performance in Diana has been much maligned. The film overall has been much maligned, I must say. People dislike this film for sure, and I completely understand why. The film doesn't feel like it's exploring a legendary, iconic character like Princess Diana. It feels like it could have been any old female lead slotted in here, exploring, a romantic relationship that goes wrong because of her popularity celebrity. It could have been about an Instagram influencer, quite frankly. It could have been about anyone. But in the case of Naomi Watts' performance specifically, that was also heavily criticized. I personally don't know why it was so criticized. I don't think she's that bad in the film as Princess Diana. You know, the head tilting is tough for both of these actresses, okay? Because sometimes it can feel like a performance, like it doesn't feel natural. It's such a unique aspect to this person, you know, the idea that Diana was known for like tilting her head and looking up, very like, you know, doe-like with her eyes. It's such a unique characteristic of hers that like it's probably been parodied a ton, but also it's just instantly recognizable. But it's tough to incorporate that into a performance without making it look like it's a comedy, like it's a parody of the character. And so I feel like both actresses struggle to make it look natural, basically. However, in large contrast to people's reaction to Naomi Watts as Diana, we have seen Kristen Stewart get a lot of praise for her performance as this character in Spencer. And here's where the controversy lies, okay? This is the main reason why I wanted to do this video overall. Okay, here we are at the purpose of the video. I don't understand why anyone is praising Kristen Stewart's performance. I don't understand the praise at all. If I see her nominated for an Academy Award for her performance in this film, I will be shocked, confused, angered, disappointed, because I just don't think her performance is particularly good. Her accent is decent. You know, as a British person, I can distinguish these things, okay? I hear that the accent is great, but her delivery is not. Her tone, like her speech pattern, is so forced. It feels like she's gasping for air at every single sentence that she says. It's so bizarre to me. Like her speech like there was this constant urgency to everything that she was saying, whereas, you know, Naomi Watts' speech pattern felt so much more natural. I genuinely don't understand why people are praising Kristen Stewart here. And this is not me being a hater, like, oh, she's Twilight, whatever. No, not by any stretch of the imagination am I in that camp of people. Please, okay? I appreciate Kristen Stewart as an actress. I think she's done a lot of work to make a name for herself outside of Twilight and has really improved on her craft over the years. I think that's very much the case. But I just think that, you know, here for her performance in Spencer, the fact that it's being applauded and deemed, you know, worthy of awards recognition already is bizarre to me. It's bonkers to me, because I just don't think she was a good Princess Diana. And honestly, upon seeing the trailer and upon hearing that she was cast as Princess Diana, I thought it was a massive mistake. Now, Spencer comes from the same director who directed Jackie, where Natalie Portman portrayed the titular character. And speaking of Jackie, that's yet another reason why I think that originally the filmmaker would have loved to call this film Diana instead of Spencer, because it would have had a nice lineup of like Jackie, Diana, Oprah. Like, we continue on this cinematic universe of the director. But anyways, her portrayal of Jackie Onassis is like incredible. Her performance in that film is amazing. Like, I've seen the footage of, you know, the actual person, I've heard her speak, and I think the speech patterns were incredible. In the case of Kristen Stewart, if you actually compare this film and her performance in it with footage of Diana, it's like, it's nowhere near. I think it was a poor casting choice. I think Naomi Watts looks more like Diana, and also she looks older. She looks like she could be Harry and William's mother, as opposed to Kristen Stewart, who looks like their older sister. I just think she's very poorly cast in this film, truly. I don't understand the praise that she's getting here for her performance. I think the praise may mostly be coming from the kind of more metaphorical, out of there depictions of Diana's suffering in this film, you know, when she's like choking on the pearls, and, you know, when she is you know, being sick and self-harming, that kind of thing. I think Kristen Stewart delivered a great performance in that sense, depicting that kind of thing, but I don't think she was Princess Diana whilst doing it. Like, absolutely not. So actually, when it comes to the actresses' portrayals of Princess Diana, even though I don't love Naomi Watts' performance, I don't think she's the best Princess Diana by any stretch of the imagination. We'll talk about who is in a second, but I would choose her over Kristen Stewart. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I would. I think Kristen just looked way too young. She didn't look anything like Diana. She didn't speak anything like her. She had an English accent, but that was pretty much it. Like, her speech patterns didn't meet Diana's whatsoever. I don't think that Kristen was as successful in her depiction of the character as Natalie Portman was in Jackie. However, this is all null and void. This literally does not matter, because ultimately the best Princess Diana that we have, the best Princess Diana that we have gotten, okay, is Emma Corrin. It's Emma Corrin. It's Emma Corrin in The Crown. This is all irrelevant. My final question was going to be, so which one of the two is the best representation of the story of Diana, the Princess of Wales? And as I've shown in this video, both of them have their ups and downs, but it doesn't matter ultimately, because The Crown season 4 exists. And that is my conclusion to this essay. Thank you for watching. No, but truly, yeah, The Crown season 4 beats both of these films by a mile. First of all, it's a show, so you have more time to explore the series of events and the character's psyche, the intricacies of her relationship with Charles. All of that is explored beautifully in The Crown season 4. And also we have more time with our Diana in The Crown season 4 because of the extended runtime. And also The Crown is just such an incredible production to begin with. The acting is superb. The costuming is brilliant. None of these films really had exceptional costuming. I would say Spencer kind of cheats, because at the very end there's this montage of Diana being Diana, and it has some of the greatest hits of her outfits, including for some reason her wedding gown, and like, I guess that's tying into her relationship with Charles and everything. But I just think it was a cheeky way of inserting the iconic wedding gown and the tiara as part of the montage. But still, I wouldn't say that the costuming is quite as incredible and mind-blowing as that of The Crown season 4. Like please. please, let's be real. Both of these films have their ups and downs, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because if you want to see a full exploration of Diana, the Princess of Wales, I would highly recommend you checking out The Crown season 4. Actually, what's interesting is that all three of these projects explore Princess Diana, but at different points of her life. So if you're really committed to find out more about this iconic princess, and you're not interested in watching a documentary or a famous interview in her own words, literally it's called Diana in Her Own Words, where she explores a lot of the difficulties that she had within the royal family, and that interview is actually featured in Diana, the 2013 movie as well. If you don't want to go down the non-fiction route, I would recommend you do a triple bill of The Crown season 4 on Netflix, and then you swiftly move along to see Spencer before moving along to see Diana. That's not to say that all three of these projects are on the same level quality wise. I would say that it kind of ranks in that order actually in terms of quality, where The Crown is up here, then it'll be Spencer, and then down here will be Diana the film. But if you want a kind of complete overlook of the Princess of Wales as depicted in these kind of fictional representations of her life, I would suggest you embark on this journey of this triple bill, at least until The Crown season 5 comes along and makes the rest of these films irrelevant, because you can see the second half of Diana's story in that. But that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Diana v Spencer and the ultimate winner, which is The Crown season 4, it's time for you guys to let me know what you think of all of these projects and the story of the Princess of Wales herself down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch you videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Bye.